Hello, it's Mr. Jewell from Pace with a video all about Advent. I expect many of you have an Advent calendar at home. There are so many different ones to choose from. Different colours, different contents ranging from toys to sweets to chocolate, different shapes and sizes. Sizes, that got me thinking, and I started to wonder how big the biggest ever Advent calendar was. I found some interesting answers thanks to our good friends at Google. In 2007, a huge Advent calendar was built at St Pancras railway station in London. It was enormous, over 70 metres high, that's nearly 40 times taller than me, and 23 metres wide, that's probably 2 or 3 times wider than your school assembly hall. 5 years later, in 2012, Lego built a huge Advent calendar at Covent Garden in London. It was created using 600,000 Lego bricks in 30 different colours, and it took 7 weeks to build. It was 3 metres high, 5 metres wide and 1 metre thick. But for the last 20 years, some people in a town in Germany have gone even bigger and better. Every year they have turned their town hall into the world's largest Advent calendar house. They use the 24 windows in the building, 2 rows of 11 and then 2 windows in the roof to become the doors or windows that are open to reveal a festive scene every day of December until Christmas arrives. That makes our Advent calendars sound rather small, doesn't it? Most of ours are probably about 40 centimetres by 30 centimetres with doors that are a couple of centimetres wide and high. Just the right size to contain a little chocolate or something else equally exciting. Now we have to wait 24 days from the start of opening our calendars until Christmas arrives. It makes the waiting a little bit easier, doesn't it? But you may be aware that as well as calendars, some people use candles during Advent as well. In many churches during this time of year, special candles are lit to remind people that Christians are waiting for Christmas, waiting to celebrate the birth of someone very special, Jesus, who they sometimes also call the light of the world. There are 4 candles on their wreaths, one for each Sunday of Advent, and then a special 5th candle in the middle that is only lit on Christmas Day. When all the candles are lit, the wreath shines brightest, celebrating the birth of Jesus, the light of the world. Now, some churches say the candles signify hope, love, joy and peace, which are all special words that describe different parts of the message of Christmas. Hope that filled the hearts of the wise men as they followed the star to find Jesus. Love, the reason that God gave his one and only Son to save the world. Joy that filled Mary and Joseph's hearts when they realised how special their baby was. Peace on earth, that's what the angels told the shepherds before they went to find Jesus. But some churches use the 4 candles to remind them of something else. They prefer to think about people who, over many, many years, were waiting for Jesus to be born. People like his mother Mary, who had to wait 9 months for the baby Jesus to be born after the angel had announced the amazing news to her. Or John the Baptist, who was born just a few months before Jesus and who would later wait for Jesus to start doing his wonderful work, marvellous miracles, and telling his terrific stories. Then there were some people called prophets who spoke to the people hundreds of years before Jesus was born, telling them that God was going to send a rescuer who would bring everlasting light into their dark world. And even before that, some of God's special chosen people who lived 1,000 or more years before Jesus were told that God had an amazing plan to send someone very special as their rescuer. They all had to wait too, like us, but for a lot longer than the 24 days or doors on our Advent calendars. If Advent calendars had been invented back then, they would have been pretty big to contain all the doors needed to cover all the days they had to wait. Let me explain. In some churches, the first candle reminds them of Abraham. God had told him he would one day have a descendant, a family member who would be God's promised rescuer, whose followers would outnumber the stars in the sky. Abraham lived 2,000 years before Jesus, which means he would have to wait 750,000 days for Jesus to be born. Imagine the enormous Advent calendar needed to fit all those days on. The second candle reminds them of people like Isaiah, who lived 700 years before Jesus. Isaiah said, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." Now, as Isaiah spoke 700 years before Jesus was born, he would need 250,000 days or doors on his supersized Advent calendar. The third candle remembers John the Baptist. He was born just 6 months before Jesus, so he was too small to be aware of just who he was waiting for. But 30 years later, he waited until baby Jesus had grown into the man we read about in the Bible, who taught like no teacher ever, healed hurt people, and whose sensational stories still speak today. The fourth candle points to Jesus' mother Mary, who had to wait 9 months after the angel's announcement for the baby to be born. She would have needed a calendar 10 times bigger than ours for all those doors. But of course, they didn't have Advent calendars, big or small, with lots of little doors to open like ours, did they? So they didn't find a chocolate or a toy behind each one, but somehow, I'm pretty certain they were just as excited about Christmas as we are. I'm going to finish with a prayer. Feel free to join with me or just listen if you'd prefer. Dear God, as we look forward to Christmas and wait patiently for it to arrive, help us to remember the many people who waited for the birth of Jesus many, many years ago. Amen.